And a channel update for January 2017 now. I thought I'd do a quick update to list a couple things that have been happening with the channel. So I have a new microphone. It's actually a blue Snowball that I got over Christmas. I had originally been using a crappy, I actually was using I have a LifeCam, Microsoft LifeCam for a webcam, but the microphone on it is awful. So I was using the microphone off another webcam, a creative, I can't remember what, creative something, webcam. The camera on it wasn't very good, so I had two webcams plugged in to a little netbook, believe it or not, 10-inch netbook, which I'm still using. And I was using the video on the Microsoft LifeCam and the audio from the creative webcam. And as you could tell from some of the other, from the library videos and some of the other audio clips, the sound quality is not very good, but I think on this it's much better. And I've also got the microphone volume setting very low on it and then speaking near into it with a sock over top of it. So I think that makes the sound quality much better. And I'm also wondering, I've seen a few tutorials on YouTube of people using software to record with. I'm just using Audacity, which just records just straight up. But I'm wondering whether I should use software that would, I guess what it does is it alters your voice a little bit and it improves it, I guess, to make maybe radio quality or something. So I'm wondering whether I should do that, and basically I'm asking whether the people listening to this, whether that's worthwhile or not. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, this channel I used to use my other channel called Andrew the Red for that's where I started on YouTube, and I did mostly Let's Plays and video games and stuff, but I kind of get out of that because I'm older and I don't waste my time as much on that kind of stuff. And I started doing that kind of intellectual content over there. So if you like the content here and you found this channel through my Jordan Peterson thing that did very well, that 14,000 view one, if you like my stuff, there's much more actually on my old channel, me going through library books and doing book reviews and stuff like that. So go there if you want to see more of that kind of stuff. But this new channel, of course, was meant to just have all my intellectual stuff on one channel, just in case I decided to return to doing Let's Plays, and I don't think I will be. So I don't really know what to do with the original channel, and I might as well just keep going with this channel. So this channel is really the aroma or an outlet for what I do in my ordinary life, my reading and studying, and I'm finishing up a PhD. But the PhD is a very narrow topic, and I can't really go outside that too much. I am on the last chapter, so I am able to do a little bit of commentary and pontification, I guess you could say. But overall, I do like to, when I read stuff, I do like to put it into a forum that can be a discussion and can be an outlet and what I get out of things and can be useful to other people. So YouTube has done that for me, so that's the purpose of this channel, is just an outlet of the stuff I do in my leisure time. So on that topic, there's a lot of books that I haven't gotten to yet that I'd like to make YouTube videos of. Unfortunately, I have been mostly making audio stuff only because it's just easier and faster, and I don't have to worry about putting on something nice. I can just record an audio thing and edit it, and it's easy, it's convenient. But ultimately, it also doesn't get as many views or is interesting. At the same time, this is supposed to be the podcast era, and I was thinking whether putting the clips on, I think, is okay with certain titles and topics that people could search for if they're interested in some kind of idea. But whether I should put all of them on one book, for example, whether I should put them all together for a long podcast, because for some of the books, if you were to put them all together, it might be an hour. But if I clip them, which I have been doing now, they're 10 minutes or so each, and that's easy enough for YouTube. But if I also provided another format, and that's the long form with all of them stuck together for on a certain topic or a certain book, then that could be something that people download as a podcast and then go out and listen to when they're walking around, which is what I actually do. Certain Joe Rogan podcasts or Peterson lectures or Davis Arini stuff, which are usually about half an hour, I'll download them and put them on my phone and then go walk around to the store or whatever and listen to them through earbuds. So I assume other people do that too. So I might start doing that also. So some of the books I've got waiting to be put into this form. I've got Victor Davis Hanson's Western Way of War, which I read probably back in the fall now, which was pretty good. It's basically about the Western way of war is you go to war and you get it over with as fast as possible. You collide, just like the ancient Greeks. He mostly talks about the ancient Greeks' form of war. You line up. This was the ancient tank. You line up in a row with people rows behind you, and you smash into each other. You run and you smash into each other, and you try to pierce into the other line, which breaks them up, and then they run, and then that's it. It's over with. And people wonder whether did they not annihilate each other? Actually not. According to Victor Davis Hanson, only about 10% of the armies would be casualties. And of course, casualties, some people think casualty means death. No, casualties means wounded and death. So this doesn't mean that 10% of an army dies, it's 10% of the army is inoperable to continue fighting. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's the Western way of war, and what Victor Davis Hanson later discusses a little bit, it's not the main part of the book, is that the Western way of war was used during World War II, but not during all the other wars. It wasn't used during Korea or Vietnam, and that's why they took much longer and ultimately were fails. And same with the Iraq War, was not used in that time, was not used in Syria. You have these proxy wars, and it just takes forever, and more people actually end up dying, and more civilians end up dying. That was another thing that Victor Davis Hanson talked about, is the Western way of war got wars out of the cities and protected civilians, because it was just military versus military out in the countryside, and it was done with. After a few quick battles, that's over with. Just like the nuclear bomb was meant to do that as well. It's just meant to finish it as quickly as possible. The long, drawn-out wars are the ones that do the most damage. So I've read through that book. It's a good book, and I will, at some point, go through the stuff that I marked and talk about it like I have been. I also have finished Herbert Spencer, the English philosopher, Man versus the State. It's actually a long book, but I did get through it. And there's a lot of very good stuff in there. A lot of very good arguments that were made back then for what was called liberalism. Herbert Spencer was a liberal, and he defended a liberal. And I think liberal is a great word. It's a good word, but today it's just horribly bastardized. Today liberals are idiots and violent people often. And it's just been taken over, and I think we should reclaim that word, just like when Ayn Rand thought we should reclaim selfishness. I think we should, because self, what's wrong with self? It's right in the word. Why should we think that's a bad word? Why is self a bad word? I think we should reclaim liberal too, but today it's a classical liberal. That's what it's called, but really it should be a liberal. We need to somehow take that back and call what the social justice warriors today are called progressives. And actually, in some cases, the new conservatives, which is just hilarious. The people that are telling us how to dress, we can't do any cultural appropriation, they're controlling our speech, all this stuff. These are the new conservatives. It's just hilarious how these politics cycle. But anyways, we should reclaim liberal. So Herbert Spencer, Man versus the State, I've got that done. I just haven't recorded clips of it yet. Another one that I finished a little while ago was, you may know Judge Napoleono. He, for a while, was on Fox News for Freedom Watch, I think. It's either Judicial Watch or Freedom Watch. It must be Freedom Watch. Anyways, he was a judge, and he's fantastic. He's like a modern-day Jefferson. And he wrote a few books they're good, they're decent. They look a little polemical, but they're actually decent books. They have all the good content in there. One of the reasons why I have a couple of his books, and the one I read completely is called It Is Dangerous to Be Right When the Government Is Wrong. The reason why I wanted his books is because I figured that he would have case law in it. He would have, here's a case, this person versus, the state, and like Roe v. Wade kind of stuff. And he would say, look, here's some cases, here's what happened, here's what was wrong about it, here's what was unconstitutional. And he did. He does have that in this book and other books. So that's what I wanted. I really wanted his research. I wanted him to compile for me, do all the work for me, to bring these cases up and what happened in these cases and what was wrong with these cases. Okay, another one. Just recently I reread Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, and if you watch the video on, what did I call it, What's Wrong with Literature Today, I do mention one of the clips at the very beginning. I think it's from her introduction, just talking about the difference between naturalism and romanticism, but there's more in there that I want to talk about, more points from the Fountainhead. There's some very good pieces of fine literature in that book, discussing characters and trying to figure out the motives of various people. Why does Dominique Franken hate hate the world and want to attack the main character, the hero, Rourke. It's because she thinks that the world is a disgraceful place and doesn't deserve great men. Well, why is that? That's an interesting idea. Some people get so dissatisfied with their fellow man and don't think that it's worth doing any great things. No one appreciates it. Same with Gail Weinert in the book. He has similar views. They're somewhat different, but he has similar motivations. He doesn't think that anyone in the world has integrity. So he just, okay, you want this kind of sloppy stuff for the newspapers because he runs a newspaper chain, then that's what he'll deliver. And because he doesn't think that people care that much, that no one really has honesty or integrity. So it's interesting because you can see a lot of that in today's world. And ask the same question. There's no doubt there's a lot of people shrugging in the world. There's no doubt that a lot of, for example, wealthy people or productive people think that, forget it, I'm not going to work and pay 80% taxes. I'm not going to work and be ridiculed for my wealth. There's all that going on in the world today. So anyways, it's a very good book, and I'm going to go through some of the points on that too. I have been going through, I'm probably halfway through Eric Hoffer's The True Believer. There's a lot of great stuff in there about the social justice movement and activism in general. The true believer is the activist, is the person who has nothing else to do but to be an activist. They're empty otherwise than their group affiliations. So it's very good, and if I was faster with this, I would have done a good contrast between the Trump movement and the Bernie Sanders movement, because there's elements in there of activism and all of that, but I wasn't quick enough, so that's kind of over. But anyways, Eric Hoffer has some very good stuff. He writes in little chapters, short chapters, kind of like Nietzsche's writings, but they're kind of early psychology, really. But it's out of Eric Hoffer. Eric Hoffer was not an intellectual, or he was an intellectual, I guess, but he wasn't an academic, is what I mean. He was a longshoreman and just a laborer, but he wrote very intelligently. So another one, Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that because that's going to be very dry. It's just basic economic facts, but I think that the world is suffering from economic illiteracy in a grand scale. So I don't know. I'd like to get that out there, but the people that really would need it would never search for it on YouTube. So I have no idea if that's even worth doing. But I might do some of the stuff on there. Another one, which is probably the most important, is called Icarus Fallen by Chantal Delsol. She's a French philosopher. I don't think she speaks any English, and her book is translated, of course. But it is fantastic. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read on cultural commentary. But it's very philosophical and just excellent. It's excellent prose. The translator deserves just as much praise. Well, the translator deserves praise. Obviously, the author deserves most praise. But it is fantastic. It is the subtitle is "In the Search for Meaning in an Uncertain World," and she talks about basically the fall of the Enlightenment, and that we're in an era of time right now where you probably heard this before. The 20th century failed to realize the Enlightenment's goals for humanity, to bring about a society that was an ideal, to rid the world of poverty, to rid the world of war and disease and things like that. And she believes, like many others, that we're in a state of crisis, that people don't know what to do because the science has failed us. Science has not delivered what we want it to do. And she thinks that mediocrity, no one has settled for it. No one wants it. No one puts up with it. As much as I think in another video I said that most people are pragmatists. It's true to some extent, but I think still people want things to be better. The human race still, for the most part, want things to improve. But what seems to be happening is that we're not making the improvements we think we should. Think of even racism in the United States, or think of the race controversy. Racism is almost non-existent, but it's still drummed up because lots of people make money off of it, like Al Sharpton's whole career. Of course, he's got to keep it going because he still wants to make a bit of money. So the race baiters, I guess they're called sometimes, they try to keep this stuff going because it's a way of searching for meaning. And a lot of these events are actually, like the social justice movement, for example, I think it's explained quite well by suggesting that people are in this crisis and they need to either sacrifice themselves or they need to put themselves into some position of progress or movement or change. And one way of doing that in an uncertain time is these weird groups, these Occupy Wall Street, these social justice groups That is a way of doing that, because people would not stand for mediocrity as much as a pragmatist would. A true pragmatist would stand for mediocrity because they have no idea what an ideal would be. I think the human race still wants to improve. The human race is still essentially idealist in the sense of wanting things to get better. But like I said, the methods we have of doing that have seemed to have failed in the 20th century. And the horrors, of course, of World War II, that kind of ideology, the horrors of totalitarianism. As much as people like to say left, right, wing, I think that stuff is, for the most part, obsolete today. It's really totalitarianism. We saw totalitarianism both in communism and in Nazism, which is really just fascism, which is, again, is basically the same kind of thing. It's statism. And I think that political conversation needs to change. But anyways, those horrors are another reason why we're in a crisis period. And she thinks that we really have to change our views on human nature, that things are different now. The human condition is different. From what all the stuff I've just said, one of the conclusions of Del Sol is that the human condition has changed. And this is a weird idea. What could that mean? What do you mean the human condition? And she says that that's why this is a crisis period, is because this is one of those rare moments when it seems like our condition on this earth has changed for us, that we were riding this tide for such a long time in terms of, I guess, away from religion and toward science as our benefactor. But that apparently, from the 20th century, has not panned out, and people are searching for something else now. And it's unlikely religion. I know the Ayn Rand Institute likes to say that religion's coming back. At least Peikoff would used to say that. I don't think that's ever coming back. I think it's going to be something else, but I have no idea what that might be. So much of people's lives are spent finding purpose and meaning, and like I said, social justice warriors are one way for people to do that. And the thing is, people have little else to do. The social justice type people, the millennials, even though I was born in the early 80s, I don't consider myself a millennial, but apparently we are all millennials. There is such a thing as a squeeze generation. I'm in the squeeze generation, the Gen Y generation, but apparently millennials covers the 80s, which I don't think it should. I think millennials are supposed to be people who were born and have always known computers and the internet. But I remember as a little kid the crappy Commodores and the dial-up internet, and I don't think that's quite fair to suggest that I've always known a world that has that kind of technology, because back then it was crappy. You played DOS games that took many floppy disks to run, and put that little thing down and put the big black floppy thing in, and it actually was floppy because it would flop, it would on the sides, and you put the little thing down and it had only 500K of memory on it. Like that, I'm not a millennial. The millennials are people that have tablets. Like that's the millennial generation. But anyways, it's very different now because they've always known technology and the internet. They've always had an outlet for their various opinions. They have less family because parents more and more having kids later and later, so they have less. They've known their grandparents less time, and they probably have less siblings. And I think that is just very different now. And so what else? People probably have less great careers. The economy isn't very good. Less jobs, less great careers, less things to do. No kids sometimes. There's just very different lives people are living now than it used to be in the past. So that's, I think, in part why Del Sol is saying that the human condition has changed. But there's a lot more in this book. That was just me flipping through it because I read it probably 2 years ago. But I just flipped through it just to talk about a few things for this audio clip. But there's a lot more in this book. It's a fantastic book. And it's, I think you'll still get it on Amazon, but I'm not sure. It might be hard to find now. But it's an excellent book, and probably the most important thing I could do for this channel would be to get Del Sol up, because it's fantastic. It's fantastic prose for a translated book, and there's a lot of good points to make in it, and lots of stuff that I still don't understand. But if I put it out there, someone will figure it out, and someone will do something with it. So so that's what's going on with this channel. If you have any comments, I always read them and happy to hear them, because in part, of course, this channel is for, in part it's for me to put stuff out there and to put stuff in a form that is better than it is in the book, and a way of learning the material myself is making it into another product, which is a fundamental concept in teaching, is to get kids to put what they're learning in their own words, or put something into some kind of product. If they can convert it or translate it, then that's a way of learning. So that's one reason I'm doing this. But of course, the other reason is because I'm trying to, for those people who are interested, and unfortunately the few, it seems, that are interested in great ideas, interested in still learning after their post-secondary. It's also for you out there as well who are listening to this right now. So if you have any comments or any excellent things that you've read that you think I would get something out of it, or any comments about this channel and how I'm operating it, I'm happy to hear those comments.